Hey, Pro-Life Jen, it's Kristan Hawkins. Welcome to this new episode of the Explicitly Pro-Life Podcast. As you have been seeing, I have been touring college campuses this semester on my campus tour, the 10 lies that pro-choicers believe. And on this tour, we did something different. We invited my good friend, Isabel Brown, who is a Gen Z expert, social media content creator, formerly a contributor with Turning Point USA, writer of a best-selling book. She's an amazing human being. And I invited Isabel to join me on this tour. So it's 2 for 1 when you come see us. And as you've been probably following, there's been a lot of clips and a little bit of drama going on from this spring speaking tour. So today I'm bringing Isabel on. We're going to go through some of our most memorable moments. The spring session is not over yet, but we're going to go through some of our most memorable moments, the things that have happened, and then also some of the conversations that we're having on campuses. I'm particularly interested from Isabel's perspective, what she thinks of being on tour with a pro-life roadshow on college campuses. So Isabel, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me back, Kristan. I think it's been like 2 years since I've been on your podcast, so this is fun.
Oh my gosh. I feel like I see you all the time.
I know, I see you. I just
night.
saw you yesterday, but isn't that fun?
Yeah.
Love being back.
Well, I'm so glad to have you back on the podcast. I pretty much have run out of almost all my friends at this point, so we're going to have to start going back and re-interviewing my friends. I'm not that popular. But no, I thought we've been having a lot of fun on campuses with, protesters and questions and great turnouts. I thought it'd be kind of fun to kind of relive some of the campus speaking tour stops. Is this the first time you've been on campus delivering a pro-life speech?
Specifically tailored to the pro-life subject in isolation, yes. I usually will touch on it in some other campus events that I've done, but this is my first pro-life tour, which has been very spicy and exciting.
It has been. It's been fun to have you there. It's like, I'm the old person because I'm a 38 and you're the Gen Zer, but you're also you have a master's degree from Georgetown in, was it biomedical and then public policy sciences stuff?
Biomedical sciences, policy, and advocacy. It's a very long name, but it was a small program. There was only 5 or 6 of us in there, so it was a really tight-knit group.
So I'm pretty close. But yeah, I find it interesting because anytime somebody will, be like, well, you're not a scientist, I just look at you and be like,
well, yes, I am.
And she understands the woke terms you're using that I have never heard before.
Yeah, last night was fun. Yeet.
Yes,
Yeet
we heard Yeetus the fetus. Yes. So yeah, I guess we could work. Let's work from the beginning. What was the first tour stop you joined me on? Was that at Campbell University in North Carolina?
It was. Yep. It sure was.
So that school is interesting because you may not know this. So my Wilberforce Fellow this year, Lydia, is the president of that group. And that's a Christian school in like rural, beautiful part of North Carolina. But that Students for Life group has had tons of vandalization, protests from the student body, the Yik Yak on that campus, which if you don't know what Yik Yak is, it's like this anonymous social media network just for a campus. Like when you get on the campus, you can say like, I want to join the Yik Yak. And so people, if it's anonymous, they are like evil. And Lydia has had like her address doxed, like really scary things happen to her on this campus. And so I wanted to go to the campus to support her. And so I tabled before, and then you joined me later in that day for the speech. And I was actually surprised there weren't that many pro-choicers. The pro-choicers that I talked to earlier in the day, kind of refusing to engage. A couple came to the presentation. I think my most notable one was the last young girl who came up, and it came up last night at University of New Hampshire. It was the same feeling of, I kind of have this feeling that abortion is wrong, but I'm still pro-choice, and it's because I'm terrified that I could get pregnant. And so I don't know, what stuck out for me from that presentation when I left of like, wow, we really got to make sure every time we're making these presentations on college campuses that we're offering this empowering message to girls. Because I remember saying like, well, I think you are strong enough and capable enough to choose life for your child and then, complete your career and academic goals. But what was your most memorable moment from that night?
I would say it was about that conversation as well. And I was thinking about that last night when we got a very similar version of the same question by a young woman saying, well, I'm pro-life, I think, because I think abortion is really bad, but honestly, like, I'm going to be in school for the next 8 years, or I'm about to start a business or whatever. And so I just don't think in my own life I could have the capacity financially, time-wise, etc., to have a child and be pregnant for 9 months and then raise that child. I just have no idea how that would happen. And my heart just broke for that first girl and the girl last night that asked us that question, because the great irony of all of this is I don't think either of us would consider ourselves by today's definition a feminist, but we were standing up on that stage sounding far more feminist than all of the people outside screaming at us wearing feminist buttons and stickers on their water bottle.
There were 300 of them screaming and a trombone actively playing last night.
Playing Jurassic Park, which was great. They have a dinosaur view of looking at human rights, and apparently they love movies about dinosaurs too. But to have that conversation and to be countercultural by telling these young women, you can do anything. Like, you can accomplish anything that you set your mind to. How upside down and backwards that we live in this world that has convinced women simultaneously that we live in the most progressive time ever and that you can accomplish anything you set your mind to, except if that thing is to be a mom.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, I know some of the campuses are now labeling me. I saw something that was like, label me a TERF, which was funny because before I wasn't a feminist.
It's a fun club.
Yes. Now I'm a trans. What am I?
Trans exclusionary radical feminist, aka TERF. Yeah. It's a really fun club to be a part of. J.K. Rowling is a part of it. Judy Blume actually just came out in support of J.K. Rowling this week, and I too have been called a TERF many, many times.
And I think Megyn Kelly, I just saw a rant Megyn Kelly just posted on her podcast of the same thing. So I'm like, amen, sister. Okay, yeah. So Campbell College was the first one you joined me in. I actually did a couple of campuses before you. Because, apparently you're like busy because you're a content creator. But I remember the campus before you, I was at University of South Carolina, and I was talking about this conversation earlier today. Some of these conversations stick with me, especially when it's like a new way, and I don't have like a great way of answering the question. Believe it or not, I don't actually always know the answer. It was this very respectful young girl who came up to me. Tell me if this came up in any other presentations. We were having the conversation, and she denied objective moral truth and reality. And so I got to her saying, I said, well, can't you agree with me that would you at least agree with me that, like, slavery, owning another human being, is objectively wrong? Like, it doesn't matter what culture it is, it doesn't matter where you are in this world, that's a wrong thing to do. And this girl, who was a minority, wouldn't actually agree to it.
What?
Yeah.
No, that has not come up.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. No, it still bothers me because I was having a conversation with her, and I said, I actually just ended the conversation and said, I'm really sorry to hear that you feel this way. Like, I can't live in a world where there's not an objective moral truth, and that, all human beings, I believe all human beings are created with value and dignity. And as a Christian, I believe they are made in the image of a creator. Therefore, there is objective moral truth. Killing innocent humans, enslaving them, using them for your own personal gain is wrong, is wrong to do that. And there really wasn't much more for me to say, because, like, how am I going to convince her abortion's wrong if she doesn't believe that slavery is wrong? It was...
that's a first I've ever heard. But the idea of subjective morality and my truth being different from your truth, so therefore my moral code of what is right and wrong is different from yours, that has come up, and that vein of thought has come up many, many times throughout our tour this spring. It always fascinates me, because the people that you would think are the most vocal about social justice activism, of caring for the most oppressed, of trying to help the little guy, sometimes literally, right, overcome obstacles in society and have a voice for the voiceless, cannot wrap their head around why abortion would be morally unjust. And it's such a fascinating barrier that I think we've hit so many times on this tour, especially during our Q&A portion.
What about the girl last night?
Yeah, I mean, they literally can't, like, get to where you want them to go. And you can bring up all of the examples from the past that you possibly can think of. Slavery, you could bring up the 3/5 compromise, you can bring up women being owned as property, you can bring up the Holocaust or the Rwandan genocide, or, like, literally any other human rights atrocity in human history, particularly the ownership of another person under law, that person wasn't even considered a person, which is very comparable to what we see with the preborn today. And they cannot make the comparison in their head.
It's no, I mean, think about last night. So last night I went out and I invited all the protesters to come in. Most of them refused. They wanted to scream and yell demonically outside the whole entire time. But some pro-choicers did come in, and we set aside our speech, because that's just been a thing that we've been doing of saying, hey, look, if you're pro-choice, you can ask your questions first before Isabel and I even speak. So we did 80 minutes of that. We had to do like a condensed version of our speech. I felt so bad. But afterwards, there was a pro-choice girl who came up to me, and then I moved away from the conversation. She latched onto you, and I felt
she was very sweet. She was great. She was
very kind, very sweet. But she, what you just said resonated with me, because she started the conversation saying I was adopted. And I realized I could have been aborted, and I would be okay. I would have been okay with that or something.
She told me,
how would you be okay with that? You wouldn't have been here.
I'm adopted. I'm from China. And because I never knew my birth parents, I would be okay if I had been adopted. As if knowing your birth parents would have made it less okay. It was an extremely confusing, nebulous backstory, but I really felt for this girl. She shared with me that her cousin had obtained an abortion when she was like 8 or 9 years old, and she remembers that being a really formative experience when her cousin was still in high school, and that at the time she just had no understanding of what that meant. Now she's looking back on that and trying to justify, was that okay? Was that not okay? Should somebody have said something to her? And she was very open to hearing anything that we had to say. She was a very kind young woman. But I'm finding, and I love that we're prioritizing this Q&A and open forum discussion in all of our tour stops, including even putting off our speech to allow for this dialogue to happen, because 98% of the people who come ask us questions are genuinely curious. They have likely never been presented a pro-life point of view or perspective ever, from their parents, from their cousins or older siblings, certainly not from their college professors who are encouraging them to act like hooligans like we saw at Virginia Commonwealth University, instead of educating them. But there's this curiosity and intellectual hunger that I see in these students' eyes, that there's just no way of satiating that in their current environment. And most of the time, I really do believe we are planting seeds to have those students go home and continue asking the right questions and eventually change their mind.
That's right. And I often think sometimes, like this girl who came up to us last night, she even said, I didn't want to ask a question. And I think that's, those are the people we're trying to reach in a presentation, because, sometimes people will ask me like, well, why do you do this? These people come up, they're clearly deranged or crazy or don't care what you have to say. They want to make you look bad. You answer them. And what good has that done? They haven't changed their mind. You haven't changed your mind. And I'm like, but you haven't considered everybody sitting in the audience, because in every one of these events, there are mushy, middle of the road folks, students who are trying to feel out this issue, who would never get up and ask a question. And it's like fascinating, I think, from the speaker's perspective to like watch that light bulb go off.
Yeah.
And I mean, the very first tour stop I did before you joined the tour, I was at University of South Florida, which I was really confused by because it was in Tampa, which isn't South Florida, people. Like,
correct.
It's very deceiving. I'm still very upset about that. But anyway, I got to the campus and there was a lot of things going on. They had Plan B in vending machines. They were passing out Plan B. I didn't have a trombone, but I did have a smooth jazz saxophonist. But it was kind of like nice. It was like smooth jazz. It wasn't the
way
Park
these
theme.
people protest. I'll tell you what. I mean, I will take a smooth jazz soundtrack to my speech
quite nice.
anytime.
Yeah, it didn't bother me at all. But what was interesting is I had a gentleman who was sitting on the bench and refused to engage, and then he got like so angry because he was hearing these conversations. And there was a crowd around me. The Students for Life kids were there, and these other pro-choice students had gathered. And he started debating me, and I did the value of the life. It was a value of a life. What's the value of a life? How valuable is life? And I finally asked him, like, I hate cockroaches. And we had a little bit of a situation in the fifth wheel camper in Florida when it started heating up with a cockroach. And I can't go into too much more detail because I'm still traumatized from that experience. It was only one, and it's gone, but it was bad.
I will never
and this
forget
had
living in DC and having to kill my first cockroach because I lived alone.
I know. That's where at first I didn't know what it was. I thought it was some demon, and when I lived in DC, I learned it was a cockroach. So anyway, so I had just experienced this very traumatic thing that happened in our family with a cockroach.
Naturally, yes.
And so I asked this gentleman, I said, well, what about the value of a cockroach? Like, I hate cockroaches. Like, I am petrified of them, which is reminding of last night at University of New Hampshire, Mr. Cockroach guy was saying he was going to come out. Yep. So I told the students, I won't run if they attack me, but if someone releases cockroaches in this auditorium, I am running. But I asked this gentleman, like, well, is my life the same, or is your life the same as the value of a cockroach? Like, can you see that there might be a difference between my life, your life versus a cockroach? And I'm just trying to get him to like acknowledge that human beings might have a little bit more value. Mm-hmm. And he wouldn't agree. And you know, I wasn't going to change this guy's mind. I don't know, you know, if he actually believed. He probably doesn't actually believe. If there's a burning building and it's filled with cockroaches in New York City and there's like 2 babies in the building, are you going to rush to save the 2 babies, or are you going to like try to save the 50 million cockroaches? You know, like, you're instinctively going to save the babies, even though you won't admit it. But It was interesting because it was about the crowd, and the people who had to listen to this man have to justify and he was going all the way there, would not give an inch on his position on abortion. His position that there was no creator, there was no meaning to life, all life was equally valuable, and all, you know, that includes a cockroach. And so I didn't have a really good rebuttal besides, dude, you're probably a mass murderer, because like when you're driving in Florida, you've probably killed a bunch of them. Yeah. And he was like, yeah, probably. But everybody else listening was like, I don't think I'm with that guy. You know,
that's what it's all about.
What are your other? So that was the South. So that was the South. Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina. What was after North Carolina?
We went to Virginia, to several schools. Virginia Tech was fascinating because I believe that was my second stop with you. And that was the first time that we offered, we're just not even going to do our speech. There was a huge crowd of people standing outside, all like really excited to protest us. Really waving their homemade posters, mostly older people that were not students on the campus. So we walked outside, naturally, as one does, to go invite these people to have a dialogue with us and ask literally any other question under the sun. We are offering to not even give our speech. You clearly have a lot to say. Come on inside and ask us questions. And they wouldn't face us. The whole crowd, like in unison, just turned around. Well,
because I brought my abortion tools out. Remember, I got my handy pockets. This is why
they started turning around before you pulled out all of the tools. Did they? Okay. And then you just thought to yourself, all right, let's have some fun. So we walked to the way they were facing, and you pulled out your tools, and all the college girls started laughing because they just had no idea how to handle the situation. So amazingly,
and then the older people started saying, God bless America. I want that soundtrack. Do you remember that? I was describing how baby was being ripped apart limb from limb in his second trimester abortion, and these old people with his vibrato voices were,
it was like this, God bless America. It was so bad, and it was just like wildly uncomfortable.
Producer Kevin, we need that video made stat. I just remembered about that.
Good stuff. Amazingly, we did convince several people to come inside, though, and so that was the first night that we decided.
That's the matching flannel lesbians.
It was. Well, we don't want to assume that they were lesbians, Kristan. We don't know their gender. They didn't say.
Okay, so, Jen.
Just saying. And we didn't do our speech. We invited anybody to come up, ask us any question you want. For a solid 45 minutes or so, a lesbian couple came up together and went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, asking us a million questions. And like this cockroach vein of thinking from your University of South Florida example, all they could define a baby as, they refused to say baby. They said, we have to say fetus, 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 even though we explained fetus in Latin literally just means small person. So, okay, I can give you fetus, whatever. Then they just kept saying a fetus is a parasite through all 9 months of pregnancy. They could not get beyond that the baby was sucking all the life out of the mother, which is not scientifically true, as we know. And it reminded me of your cockroach encounter and conversation, because everybody in the audience, even those who had come to protest us, were sitting there thinking to themselves, I don't think that's how pregnancy works. Like, I know I'm pro-abortion. I know I stand for women's health care, right, with their signs, but I don't think that's how that works. And it was such a light bulb moment, you're right, from behind the podium as a speaker, looking out into the crowd as you're going back and forth. So many people tilt their heads and start questioning things or start really quietly nodding to themselves, and it's a really beautiful sight to behold.
It really is. And we had Mr. Bro Choice in the back who kept randomly like yelling things at me.
Yeah, he was like,
I was like,
frat
thanks, Mr.
bro
Bro
for
Choice.
abortion. That was wild.
Yeah, it was like Mr. Fratty Man. How I do remember, because that question when she started bringing the parasite, I was so grateful to have you on, because I was like, Isabel, biomedical sciences master's degree, please answer the question. So can you answer that question for everyone here? Like, when someone says the fetus is a parasite, or a fetus has a parasitic relationship to the mother, what is a good, like, concise response to that?
I mean, you don't have to look much further than what a parasitic relationship inside of a human being actually looks like. People get parasites all the time. If you go down to Mexico on vacation and you drink too much tap water, which you shouldn't do, you will probably come home with parasites, tapeworms in your tummy, or all kinds of stuff, right? A parasite is a strictly one-way street relationship where one organism is leeching off of the host. Like a leech literally is a parasite leeching off of, taking the supplies from the host species. If you're a fan of The Last of Us, which is a fantastic video game and show that just totally broke my brain for the last several months on HBO, you should watch it, Kristan. It's phenomenal.
I've never heard of such a thing.
The entire concept of the cordyceps fungus that infects humanity is a parasitic relationship. It takes over the host of the human body and manipulates and uses it to its own advantage, but doesn't give anything back in return, right? That is fundamentally the opposite of what a child in the womb operates as in the relationship between the child and its mother. It's actually a two-way street when you're pregnant. So most people don't realize this. They think, oh, the baby's just taking all the food from the mom and taking all the blood supply from the mom, and that's how the umbilical cord works. But the placenta and the umbilical cord are a two-way street, and the baby is actually giving back to the mom all the time as well, particularly through donating stem cells to make her immune system stronger throughout the pregnancy, so she's more likely to carry that baby to term. That's just one example, but there is so much scientific evidence to support this is a symbiotic two-way street relationship benefiting both the mom and the child. It could not be more fundamentally different from a parasite.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. Wasn't there something where it's like, even after you give birth, you actually get stem cells? Like, you still have, like, they can test your blood and know that you've had a child.
Yeah.
And what the sex of that child was.
It changes so much of you because, again, that two-way street did exist during pregnancy, which is
and
just so cool.
You get immunity to certain illnesses as well. Like, you're like superhero when you're pregnant.
Amen to that.
Yeah. All right. So Virginia Tech, I was really glad to have you there to answer all those questions. Then we had the Flannel Twins. Then we went to William and Mary, which you were not with me at William and Mary.
I wish that I was, though.
You're just too much. You're too much in demand. So William and Mary, we didn't do a speech. We did a tabling event. And the reason I wanted to make sure we stepped William and Mary on the tour was because last semester in the fall, the first time we've ever had this happen, a student actually threw urine on our regional coordinator, Gavin, and one of the student leaders at William and Mary while they were tabling.
That's ridiculous.
And he actually was arrested because the student, I know the student's father who's on our board, who's best friends with the Attorney General of Virginia. So don't throw urine on people who have friends with the Attorney General of your state. So the student was actually arrested.
In general, probably.
In general,
but
yeah. So anyway, so I knew things were going to get a little crazy. So we went, and it started out really slow at that campus. There was this, and then I was getting kind of bored. I was like, oh, no one's coming. We're in a bad spot, whatever. And I had my fetal models out, and this little preschool group walked by, and it was the cutest thing. I said, kids, do you want to hold what a baby is like in their mommy's tummy? And it was so cute because, like, one little boy tried to, like, start twisting the head, and the little girl was like, stop that! It's a baby! It's a baby! And I was like, all you college students need to, like, gather around and watch these 4-year-olds explain to you. And it was so cute. And so they left, and I had this nice little conversation with the preschool teacher. And, the conversation started going, and then the yik yak on campus started to, like, have mumblings that there was an anti-choice extremist on campus and also transphobe. So, like, towards the last 3 minutes, this trans woman, so a man wearing woman face, comes up draped in the transgender flag, like coming like he's coming to attack. Greg, my security guard, like steps like right in front of me, and that's when it started to get crazy. We had a lot of conversations. We had a lot of conversations that day because that was the day after the tragic shooting in Covenant, the Covenant school in Tennessee. And this kid was calling me transphobic because one of the lies we dispute is men can't have babies. And so it's hard to say that with a straight face, but they really can't.
I still can't say it with a straight face on campus.
I know. So this guy was calling me a transphobe, and then he's like, wow. He's like, I could really see why transgender people might get very angry at you. And I said, enough to shoot me? Do you think that justifies? And he was like, well, I can see why they'd be justified. Like it was a pretty interesting exchange that we had. There were a bunch of exchanges. I actually had one girl. You would have been proud of this conversation. One of the other lies we talk about is how hormonal birth control is bad for women's bodies and how there's never, an honest conversation. You have a very personal story with birth control. And this girl came up. She was getting me on all this stuff, and she was going to, get me. And her friend was really quiet, but she was like the muscle behind it. And especially this, they were going through like on the billboard, the lies. And the one girl goes, you know what though? I disagree with all you about this, but this birth control thing, you're actually 100% right.
Yep.
And I was like, huh? If I'm 100% right on this, do you think I could be 100% right on anything else?
Maybe, just
but,
maybe.
That's
where I'm finding
exactly
the most agreement on this tour is about birth control. Like, it doesn't matter what anybody thinks about abortion. It doesn't matter if they're abundantly pro-life from womb to tomb, or they are overwhelmingly in favor of Planned Parenthood or wearing the Planned Parenthood t-shirts. Everyone in the audience sits there and nods their head in unison when we start talking about the negative side effects of hormonal birth control. Just a couple weeks ago, I had the opportunity to go on the very viral Dating Whatever podcast, which was incredibly enlightening and great opportunity for conversation. But hormonal birth control came up, and I was sitting at this table with a recovering sex addict, an OnlyFans creator, and a stripper part-time, people in college, people engaged, like the whole spectrum of dating in America. Every single girl at this table had been on birth control before, was either in the process of quitting or was talking about why they were so glad that they quit. And that sparked so many other conversations about the dangers of hookup culture and why modern feminism was toxic. And these were like left-wing women saying this. So it was just a fascinating window into finding common ground. And we're seeing that on campus all semester.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's absolutely, because you share your story on campus about, having to go on birth control because of Accutane and you can just see every girl in the audience is like, yep, me too. Me too.
I too had feminine boyfriends and was really depressed and kind of wanted to unalive myself in high school and just had no idea what I wanted out of my life and had no interest in my hobbies and activities anymore. Every single girl will come up to us at the end of these events and come share their story about it. It's really
What's the
harrowing
book that you're
sad.
sharing?
I actually have it right in front of me, amazingly, because I just did a different video about it. It's called This Is Your Brain on Birth Control by Dr. Sarah Hill. She is a liberal feminist evolutionary psychologist. So this is not right-wing Christian propaganda by any means. I believe she's a professor at Texas Christian University. I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on that, but the book is absolutely fascinating, talking about how in America we've spent the last several decades unpacking how dangerous hormonal birth control is from a physical perspective. And whenever you're prescribed hormonal birth control, they always have to warn you, you might have breast cancer or blood clots or a stroke or whatever later on down the line, but that's really minimal and it's better for you just not to get pregnant anyway, so just take it anyway. Nobody has researched from a large peer-reviewed study perspective the psychological effects of hormonal birth control and why regulating your hormones artificially changes you and who you are. Because sadly, in America, we look at hormones as something that happened to you. You say, oh, I'm just so hormonal today. Ha 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 ha. In reality, your hormones are you. It is what things smell like to you and how you respond to stress and who you're attracted to and what your sex drive is and whether or not you even like to listen to music. All is regulated by your hormones. And so when we like to play God and pick and choose when we regulate that, there's no such thing as turning on or off a switch over here that doesn't impact everything else in your body. And we're now learning that this entire generation just has not had the most informed consent possible because we didn't know that it was going to change every single thing about us.
Well, we didn't study it.
Yeah.
Women said, I don't feel that great. And they're like, yeah, but you need this to succeed.
You'll be embarrassed. You'll break out if you quit.
I'm pretty sure this is
your
the
periods
author.
will be really bad.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the author I saw in Good Morning America.
She was recently. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, she presented it and said all these terrible things, like how it literally changes your brain, and how she started taking, the story was she started taking birth control after she got married, didn't want to get pregnant. This is what we just talked about, fear of getting pregnant, being a college student, trying to get your degree. And so she got on birth control and then stopped sexually desiring her new husband and was like, there's something wrong here. What's changed here? I'm a newlywed. I should want to, sexually desire my husband. And then it was interesting because all the other ladies on the like talk show couch were like, but we're not saying birth control bad. Birth control is really good, and it's done so much to advance women in our culture. And so it was like, yeah, it's changing the way your body like functions and how your brain thinks and who sexually desire. But we're not saying it's bad. It's very good. I mean, it's unbelievable the levels we go to. And I think it's fascinating because that conversation with Mary was really interesting because this girl didn't say anything. Her friend kept trying to like call me transphobe, a homophobe, every thing, and was attacking me on every point. And her friend was like, yeah, but I actually think you're 100% right on this. I'm like, if I'm right on this. Yeah. And so similar, Christopher Newport University was that same night. Hat tip, don't do two things in one day. I was exhausted. You weren't there. Of course, it was filled, pro-aborts in the room. It was great. I had somebody come up to me at another campus who said she told her brother, who was at Christopher Newport, to come to the event. That was going to be his Christmas and birthday gift to her, just to come and sit. And I actually know who it was because he was not happy to be there, but he started taking notes, and you could tell he's a total like frat boy. He didn't fit in with the normal pro-life guys. And he was in the front row. He started taking notes. And so she's like, yeah, he totally changed his whole mind on the whole issue. So
wow.
Like, he won't, stop talking about it. But that was a cool one because you missed it. There was a Spice Girls and coloring safe space across the hall.
Spice Girls? I love Spice Girls.
I know. You would have had so much fun. I walked in right before and I was like, hi, everyone. I'm Kristan Hawkins. Thanks for having this safe space from me. I'm going to be starting my speech now. So if you all want to come in, I'd be happy to, I did the whole thing we did at VCU of just like, hey, we'll be willing not to give our presentation and asking questions. And they were all like aghast because I violated their like safe space. And that's all they were doing was listening to Spice Girls. And they had these like feminist coloring worksheets and they were coloring. And they were getting academic credit for it too, which was actually interesting.
That's the worst part of that.
You missed a fun one on that, I just want to say. And then you joined me though the next day.
At Liberty.
You want to give a recap of what happened?
Well, we went to Liberty first.
Oh, I forgot about Liberty.
Which was a great stop. Great questions.
Yes.
Your kids were able to join us, which was super fun, and they got to ask some questions for their homeschool curriculum, which was awesome. That was my first trip to Liberty. It's a very great campus. We had a blast.
It's a beautiful campus.
Then, though, things took a very different turn on the tour when we showed up the following week in Richmond. I had never been to Richmond. I lived in D.C. twice, but really hadn't explored very much of Virginia.
You don't need to go back to Richmond.
No, I probably won't. Went to Virginia Commonwealth University for our event, and to be totally transparent with you, I had never really heard of VCU. Like, I knew it existed, but I didn't know what it was known for. Had no idea possible what I was about to experience. I was just thinking it's going to be another great event, Virginia Tech style. We'll probably have a few people come protest and ask us some questions, but like, it's just going to be like the rest of this tour. We pull up downtown Richmond, Virginia, and we see these people walking on the sidewalk, and everybody
we got to the parking garage,
as we're driving to the parking garage, everybody my age is wearing masks, which is wild to me because every campus we've been on, including the really liberal leftist campuses, everybody's over masks. Like, everybody has gotten rid of them. Every once in a while, I'll see one or two people wearing them, but quite literally everyone on the sidewalk was wearing 2 or 3 masks. So I start chuckling at that, and then we start pulling into the parking garage, and we see a group of people wearing all black, one of whom is quite obviously a biological male, but is wearing a varsity cheerleading skirt ensemble with a crop top revealing a happy trail of hair into the cheerleading skirt that is partially unzipped so you can see panties poking out of the cheerleading skirt.
And to confirm, he is not a biological female.
Correct.
I stopped to take a picture of him.
You look at me
because I was like, I have to I have to show my husband this.
I'm gonna get out of the car and come invite this guy to our event. Like, how great would that be if this person comes to our event? I'm gonna go invite him. And security's like, no, Kristan, we should probably just park. Like, it's fine. We'll go inside. It's fine. So we park the car. You take us, a little slide picture of cheerleading man, and we walk into the building. And they put us in this weird conference room as our green room that was surrounded by doors. So there's it wasn't like a safe room. There were doors everywhere. No. We sit in there for a minute, and I start asking the amazing president there, who is a brave warrior, and we'll get to her story in a second, if we're going to have any protests. And she said, I don't really know. Maybe. I mean, we haven't really heard much about it. 5 minutes later, she comes back in the room white as a ghost. Hey, the room's really filling up with people that are not our people. And I didn't really know what she meant by that, but I assumed it meant protesters. Just so you know, I hope you guys are okay with protesters. We're great. We love protesters. And we wait in the hallway, and as she starts to introduce us, the first person
before that, Greg, my security guard, came in and said, they're trying to blockade the doors. Do you remember that?
Yes, I vaguely.
And so the security guards, my security guards had to I don't know what they did, shove these people out so we could get into the room.
So then the first person I see is cheerleading man. And I'm like, look, he came, Kristan. This is great. So fun. I'm so glad that we have
Holy Spirit moment.
Some opposition. Some opposition immediately, before we even had the opportunity to introduce our names, turned into all hell breaking loose. And many of you guys listening to this podcast probably had the opportunity to watch either Kristan or I's live stream on Instagram in real time. I ended up sharing the Instagram live stream on my normal live stream that night. And we've been on several different news organizations and outlets talking about what happened since then. But it was really my losing my Antifa virginity moment, I guess. And honestly, in the moment, wasn't scary at all. I didn't feel afraid.
Losing your Antifa and virginity was thing. I lost. My cherry had been popped a long time ago on that one. But so congratulations.
Good. I was so excited. Well, at least for an event that I was speaking at, right? I've had that happen when I was hosting events as a student, but I was not afraid at all in the moment. I don't think either of us were. Looking back at the footage, though, particularly Kevin's footage, when people were storming our podiums with megaphones, trying to hit us over the head, people were trying to come punch us regularly. Punches were getting thrown in the crowd, and the campus police officers were just nowhere. It's wild to go back and rewatch that footage versus what it looked like from our eyes, in the moment.
Yeah, and that was the thing is when Greg came out and was like, my security guard, he's a former DC police officer, big guy, don't want to mess with him.
No, you don't.
And apparently there's a video of when the first person hit Kevin, our video producer and photographer, and Greg called this guy out. I guess there's a really funny TikTok where someone's like, they didn't know a linebacker was going to get them, because it's Greg just smashes this person against the wall. It's hilarious.
Awesome.
But Greg, I had asked Greg specifically, have you called campus police? What's the campus police situation? Because usually campus police, especially at VCU, where we know the Students for Life group has had problems with Antifa in the past. There's an Antifa organizer is pretty well known in the Antifa circles. Andy No, who's the big reporter on all things Antifa, knows these people's names, who they are. We knew it could get crazy, so they had already made contact with the police. Our security officers went to the campus hours in advance to meet with the police, get the numbers, what the security protocol was. And Greg was like, Kristan, they're not coming. And I was like, what do you mean they're not coming? You walk in the room and everyone's wearing a black mask. So here's a hat tip. If you're on a campus and it's going to be a contentious event and everyone has a black mask, masks are okay, maybe just liberals. If they're all black masks and you've got people wearing black wigs that go down to here, their mask is here so you can't see their face, they're all wearing black, it's Antifa. That's
not to mention trademark. They were literally waving an Antifa flag, so they weren't trying to be covert about anything.
That's true.
But it was just shocking because there was this barrage of people in a small room. We were in a very big room.
Very small. The school was not treating us right. Remember, because we found out 5 minutes before we weren't going to have AV. And I was like, what do you mean we're not going to have AV in this room? Oh, yeah, the school wouldn't give it to us. I'm like, but it's right there.
Then lo and behold, we find out the school won't even send a police officer, which was easily a
27
first for me.
Minutes. Yeah,
no, I think
27
it was
30,
37 minutes or so.
I thought it was 27. When we walked in, they started booing us immediately. We started going live.
Booing is a generous term, I think.
Yes.
But yes.
But we tried to like do the whole thing of, look, sit down. We'll answer any question you have. We won't even give our speech. Shut up, you effing fascist Nazi. That was like the whole time. I think it was 27 minutes, maybe 37 minutes from the time we started live streaming until the police finally came in after the second altercation when our student got hurt trying to defend our camera, which now we're now telling everyone,
leave
going,
the cameras.
hey, please. Last night we were like at University of New Hampshire, leave the cameras. Do not try to save Students for Life's cameras. Save yourself. But I went out in the hall at one point and said, get in here. And they like refused to come in. I've never been in a situation where the campus police
weird,
and it was campus security and the city of Richmond police. It was
would not come in.
Would not come. They were literally outside the hall hearing it happen. VCU has a policy that invited guests are allowed to speak in a safe place, you know, that they're not supposed to be shouted down, blah, blah, blah. Totally failed. I came back in, and it's a really funny moment on the live stream because I'm like, hey, Isabel, if they have to remove me, they will have to arrest me. Are you okay getting arrested? And you were like, yeah, let's do it. But then after
for some context too, if you haven't seen any of these live streams or you didn't catch any of the footage, you can go watch it on the Students for Life YouTube page. Kevin did an amazing job compiling all of this footage so that you can watch it in real time as all of this is unfolding. But essentially, Kristan and I tried to do our, hey, we won't even give our speech, we'll answer all of your questions. Mm-hmm. Literally just get screamed at for 30 minutes straight. You are a fascist. You are a Nazi. Go home. We don't want you here. You're transphobic.
Read them the definition of fascist.
Every single thing you can possibly imagine, just looping for 30 minutes, people screaming bloody murder. Obviously, tensions were very high. Some people really did try to ask us questions, and it was really hard to hear them, so they had to come right up to touching the podium. And I actually do think we changed a few people's minds up there when you were courageous enough to come all the way up. There were some pro-choice girls. I don't know if she came to me, she said, I'm really pro-choice, but I'm really open to hearing more about this. Do you think they're going to actually let you speak? I really want to hear you. I know. She wanted to ask so many. She was great, actually, and wanted to ask so many questions.
Honestly, even if we didn't get to deliver a speech, I would guess her mind probably gets changed, seeing how
the behavior
terrible they acted.
So eventually tensions get so high that fists start flying and punches start getting thrown and camera equipment starts getting threatened and destroyed. One police officer, after a second altercation, after people have been punched twice now, so this has happened 2 times, and no police officers are in this room. One police officer, I think it was the head of campus police, walked into the room and yelled, everybody get the F out, to a mob of like 75 Antifa people. And I kept thinking to myself, is this your first day as a police officer? First of all, you look 12. But second of all, you're looking at a mob of people who do not give a flying F if they get arrested. They like that. That actually is a good thing for them. And you just told them to get the F out of this room. So immediately, naturally, they all say in unison, you get the F out. And he walked out of the room. And he left. Yeah. And that's when I knew this event's not going to happen. Like, they're just going to make us leave, which is so silly because it's a public university. But about 10 minutes later. Then they said, you have
to go. They ushered us out. And I kept saying, you're going to let me back in. You're going to, we'll see. And then they put us in the safe room.
The safe room for like 3 hours and wouldn't let us leave, which is essentially
that's the thing I didn't know after we left. So we were actually allowed to leave.
I asked several times, can I go use the restroom? Can I leave? No, you're not safe out there. You have to stay in here. In this room, but they surrounded by doors.
They allowed about 12 to 15 students come in. And one of the girls who came in was pro-choice. She knew some of the pro-life club members. And we were able to have like a little round table impromptu like Q&A session with them. I thought was really good. Took a little picture. And then we were able to leave like 3 hours later. But they didn't even let us leave with security. No. Like the police officers didn't escort us. So they just left. So Autumn, the student president who actually got hurt trying to save the camera, and I demanded the EMTs come in, and after like throwing a hissy fit, they called the EMTs.
After like an hour. Yeah.
Yeah. So the EMTs came. Her parents think were there. Her mother leaves. Her mother calls us and is like, you can't go out these doors. They recognize me. They're still out here. They're eating their freaking Chick-fil-A, which have some values, Antifa. At least boycott Chick-fil-A. That's God's chicken. Like, what are you doing?
Oh, man.
So Autumn's mom leaves, calls Autumn, and is like, hey, they're still out here waiting to harass us. So then we were like the last ones to leave. And thank goodness my 2 private security officers that Students for Life supporters are generously paying for were able to get us to the car. My husband was like, do not stop. Because I was staying like 2.5 hours away in the camp where we were in rural Virginia. He's like, I don't care if you have to pee. I don't care if you're hungry. You're not stopping this car until you pull up at this camper and I have my gun in my hand. And I was like, oh God.
My fiance was texting me from a plane.
Tifa doesn't have cars. They would have to have jobs to have cars.
Correct. Although they have jobs enough to afford Chick-fil-A, so there is that.
That's true.
My fiance similarly was texting me from a plane, and I have no idea how his plane Wi-Fi was good enough to watch my live stream on Instagram. And he's like, "Are you okay?" And I wasn't getting any of my texts or anything. It was wild, but that was such a surreal moment. As we know, 2 or 3 days later, very similar tactics were used against Riley Gaines at San Francisco State University, and it escalated so far with also no police presence to the point that she was actually assaulted herself by one of these radical trans protesters. She was held hostage inside the room she was speaking
They demanded
in for
money
3
for her
hours.
release.
Yes, they did. And they treated it like a huge win. And sadly, just like VCU, it kind of was a win because these universities gave into this heckler's veto and violence and allowing the people shutting down any freedom of expression with violence to literally walk away and go buy chicken sandwiches while we were essentially detained for several hours for our own safety. We were anticipating a little bit more of that last night at the University of New Hampshire. Luckily, we were pretty safe. I guess paying for a bomb-sniffing dog when the university forces you to do that is a nice way to ensure that everybody
After
is
the
going to be
VCU
safe.
video went viral, University of New Hampshire called us the very next day and said, you're going to have to now pay for your own bomb-sniffing dog. And then
Who was
2
a
days
very
before,
cute dog, for the record.
it was very cute. I can have pictures. Then we had to pay for our own police officers, which at State University campus, we should not have to do. That's a poll tax on free speech.
Yeah.
If you have to pay for free speech, it ain't free, people.
Correct.
And so there's going to be more to say about that in the coming days and weeks, I'm sure, from Students for Life's perspective. But I let him have it at the end of my speech last night when I was looking at the campus administrators about.
Yes, you did.
It was just very sad indictment. I mean, we were treated like rock stars. We had a barricade surrounding us. We had bomb sniffing dogs. I had 300 people, yelling and screaming for my attention out in the hallway. I mean, like, this is rock star treatment, baby. When you
Taylor
travel
Swift
with me,
too?
Isabel.
Yeah. Well, I'm anxious to see how these tactics continue to escalate, particularly as we're going to California next week. And that seems to be where so much of the insanity is concentrated on these college campuses today. But to basically round out our story time from this campus tour so far, which has been so phenomenal. And thank you so much again for allowing me to come with you. It's been a really great experience. I ended last night after you stared the administration right down in the face. This isn't free speech at a free speech university. I looked at our students, and this is the message that I hope everybody takes away from this. Whether you're a college student, you're involved with Students for Life, you're a pro-life activist yourself, or just a person that's genuinely interested in what's going on in the world right now, this type of behavior is exactly what forces most people to sit down and shut up and get scared and not keep having these conversations, not push forward, not advocate for objective truth or reality or even the opportunity to change your perspective or mind. Do not let them get away with it, because when those wins happen, that's when you lose what we call a culture war that we're fighting every single day today. This is a sign to me that we are doing really important work on college campuses when this behavior continues to ensue. And I bring on all the protests. I'm really excited for all of it. But mostly I see that light bulb moment happening for so many students who are not crazy, violent protesters. I hate that becomes the normative story when that's not normal. That's very rare that those things do happen. Most of the time we have real dialogue all the time. It's great. I think there's so much to be said by pushing through the fear and the worry about cancel culture and the worries about your F's on your papers or losing your social media account or whatever. You never know who is going to be that third party person sitting in an audience, metaphorically or literally, that desperately needs to hear what you have to say. And it's been a really powerful reminder of the importance of truth and continuing to be courageous, because courage is contagious.
That's right. That took some skill to say that phrase without messing it up. Good job.
Thank you.
Courage is contagious. No, I mean, I think it's so interesting when you see the videos of the speeches or the short little clips. I mean, people have come up to me at every single tour stop and said, watching these videos have given me the courage to get involved. I always knew I was pro-life. I didn't know how to defend it. I mean, this is and that's not even to mention the people who were pro-choice who now DM or email us and say, I just, one girl just emailed me recently. I'm from California. My family's all been pro-abortion. I volunteered at Planned Parenthood for a number of years. I found one of your videos and I kept watching, and I can't, believe. Yeah, it's just unreal. I'm now 100% pro-life. And so I think looking at, when you're in that moment, sometimes you're like, this is crazy. They hate you. But you have to look at the broader perspective of who else is in that audience, who's listening. Are we standing up for free speech? Absolutely. If we don't stand up for our free speech in this country, it will be erased.
Well, we won't have anything that happens left to stand up for. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, everything that happens in Canada eventually happens here. And it's sad what we're seeing, and some of the behavior we're seeing here played out there years ago. And so now is the time that we have to continue to speak up, and we can't be bullied into silence, even with these like trans. I mean, that's probably the most controversial thing we say now on this speech. The top 10 lies is men can't get. It's honestly, it's the easiest answer. The answer is no, only biological females. What's funny, Isabel, you always ask the audience a question. You say, "Oh, what's the one thing you have? What's the one organ you have to have in order to have babies?" And everyone's like,
That's how they say it every time.
Yeah, even.
And then I say, "Who has a uterus?" And it's just silent. And then there's usually one or two people. Women? Question mark.
Biological females. But I mean, like that everyone should be able to uniformly say that.
Yes, they
should.
And
it just shouldn't be so. My kids knew it in Liberty.
True.
Their moms, women can have babies. So I think this is why we have to continue to speak out. So thank you so much for joining on the tour and all my crazy adventures this semester on campuses, Isabel. It's been a lot of fun to have you there. And it's been a lot of fun to be able to get out, have these conversations that we know are pushing the Overton window, changing the culture, changing minds. And thank you for all of you who, send Isabel and I encouraging messages and notes when you watch the videos. And I was getting prayers texted to me last night when people were watching the live stream, University of New Hampshire. We really do appreciate all those, even if we don't respond to them. Isabel, how can folks follow you? You've got like a daily YouTube, you're going live, and you're so much better than tech than I am. So if you want like up-to-date news, go to Isabel. So
well, it's Kristan, you're huge on TikTok. You just don't realize it yet. So we'll get you there, I promise. But you can find me across all social media platforms at the Isabel Brown, Isabel, and Brown is spelled just like the color. We do a daily live stream at 3 p.m. Eastern, and we talk about all kinds of stuff with trending news and current events and what's happening on TikTok, all from a Gen Z perspective. It's really fun, mostly cultural, but with some politics sprinkled in there every once in a while as well. I also have a locals community, which is for people who are looking for bonus content not found anywhere else. And we have 2 series that live exclusively over there. One on dating and relationships. So this birth control conversation, hookup culture, we talk a lot about that stuff. And the other one on faith and the church every Thursday. So we have a lot of good stuff happening right now, but mostly I just like to tell people my job is to get up and tell people the truth. So whether that's with you on campuses, Kristan, or a 15-second TikTok video or anything else, I feel really blessed that this gets to be my career, and we certainly have a lot of fun doing it.
That's right. And Elizabeth was trying to convince me to get a locals community going. I don't know. We'll see.
Let us know if you want more bonus Kristan content.
Yeah, tell us what bonus content you want.
She's so fun, you guys.
I know
the Kristan content.
We can't publish all of that. I don't know. Just let me know. What would you like more exclusive content on? Let me know. Put it in the DMs or message me. Thank you all for tuning in for this special episode of Explicitly Pro Life. I hope you had as much fun listening as I did listening to Isabel and remembering some of the stories from the past few weeks and months. I'll see you all next week. Bye.